Hi, welcome to the second week of Movie Month. So like I said in my last video, not all of my videos are going to be a movie review. I wanted to put a bit of variety into it. And because of that, today's video is going to be some of my favourite movies. I'm going to talk about some of the films that I have not just loved currently, but have loved as I've grown older, because of course our favourite movies do change. You know, some of the films we may have loved when we were a child, we may not love quite as much as we get older. But some films we loved when we were a child, and even though we don't watch them much anymore, we still put them on every now and again. You know, they're not films that sort of go into obscurity and we're like, oh yes, I used to love this film. It's like, no, you watch them. You may not watch them often, and it may go years without watching it, but you still love them. And at one point you might have even obsessed over them, like I did with some of the films I'm going to mention. Although I tend to obsess over TV shows, but never mind. So yes, so I'm not going to do a top 5. I'm not going to do 5 favourites. I'm just going to talk about some of the films that I love and have loved over the years. So we're going to get started with one of the films I've loved probably the longest, I suppose, and one that, considering I've mentioned I am not the biggest fan of love stories, Dirty Dancing. I fell in love with this film when I was a kid. I think it was maybe not so much the love angle, but I think the music, the dancing, and that last scene, where, with the whole big, you know, everybody dancing and there's that lift and everything like that. I was a sucker for that when I was a kid. I loved it. I got really sucked into it. And yes, me and my friends even tried to do the lift. Mostly my parents trying to get my mum to do it rather than us tried. We did try in the playground as well, which thankfully nobody had any serious head injuries, or any, thankfully. We were quite lucky that we were really so bad, but not so bad that we hurt ourselves. Anyway, so yeah, it is one that I haven't watched in a long time, but I do get... It's annoying because the main song for it, I've Had the Time of My Life, I've heard so many times on the radio that I don't get the same buzz as I used to when I'm listening to it. But if you put it in the context of the film, that's completely different. So yeah, I absolutely loved this film when I was younger, and I still do. Now, another film I've loved since I was a kid is a bit of an odd one to a degree, because it's part of a film series. And whereas everybody loves the second one, I love the fourth one. Star Trek Voyage Home! Yeah, I love all the Star Trek films, with the possible exception of the fifth and the first, and Insurrection. But when I grew up, it was the fourth one I always wanted to rent from the video store. Whenever we went down to rent a video, it was always this one that I wanted. And I watched it over and over again. I never actually owned it. It was only when I got it on DVD did I first own it. But I always wanted to rent it. I always loved it when it was on TV. And I think the reason I loved it more over, say, Wrath of Khan is because to a kid, it appeals more because of the humour. It's a lot more humorous. It's set in modern day, for the most part. And it's got whales, you know, it's sort of got an environmental message, which you don't necessarily pay attention to, but you sort of think, yes, whales are good, we like whales. And that probe, oh, that noise it made, oh my god, it used to scare me as a kid. But I still liked it. It was very atmospheric, but it did used to sort of give me the heebie-jeebies when I was a kid. It still does, actually. And I've seen this film so many times. Every time I do a Star Trek rewatch, obviously, I get about as far as this and then sort of stop most of the time, or skip to the sixth one. But yeah, that one, I love the humour. I love the way the characters... I love the fish out of water. I've always been a bit of a sucker for the fish out of water stories. And we stick to the theme of films that I liked when I was younger, but probably liked more when I got into my teens, because I never saw this film at the cinema, even though I was the age where I possibly could have, I could have, and that is Jurassic Park. I've actually got a box set of this, of all 3 films, which the first one is very much the best one. And this is one that I used to own on VHS, and I used to watch quite a lot, like over and over and over again. I've even read the book. And I read that a couple of times, despite the fact that being completely different to the film. And I think it's one of those films that gets everybody. So many people love Jurassic Park. I think it's because it's held up so well over the years, with the effects, and the dinosaurs still look amazing even now. and the characters are still a bit fun. I am a bit of a fan of Jeff Goldblum. I do like his weirdness. I think I even went through, and he was one of my favourite actors actually when I was a teenager at one point, because I do remember wanting to watch a lot of films with him in, weirdly. But of course his character is kind of amusing, even though he kind of gets cut out for most of the end of it. Sorry, the rest of this video is going to come without lighting from above because my light just decided to go again. This time it's not so atmospheric, but I've got me lights, got me light from out there, so that should be enough. So as I was saying, yeah, I think Jurassic Park is a film that everybody can enjoy, everyone can love, for different things. It's got good suspense, it's got fun characters, and it's got dinosaurs. And what I think about the other ones, well, Lost World I used to really like, and I think I still do, even though the end bit's a bit unnecessary. Third one's boring. I've watched it once, I don't care to watch it again. And I really did like Jurassic World. The end dinosaur fight makes it worth it. And I am looking forward to the new one. Yeah, I managed to get the light working, so we will continue, hopefully, with the light on. So, my next favourite film is actually linked into one of my favourite musicals, because I may have mentioned that my favourite musical of all time is Les Mis. And when I got into Les Mis, I was very interested to see what else there was, because I knew it was a musical, I didn't know what else it was. I knew it was a book, I did read the book. And I wanted to know if there was any other films about it. And what do you know, there was. There's actually a few. There's been there's been films made about it since like the 30s, 20s, something like that. And the version that I found first was one that was at the time quite new, which was the 1998 version with Liam Neeson and Geoffrey Rush. And that became my favourite. I bought this on VHS and I watched it over and over. I watched it literally every day at one point. Every day, every other day, then every week, every month, that kind of thing. And the weird thing is, it's so different to the musical, because of course it's not a musical, it's a movie version. But it doesn't seem to matter. It's obviously the characters are still good and the story is still good. And that is what keeps it interesting. Other versions, I have seen other versions of Les Mis. There's one that's actually done by French actors in English, which is like a mini-series. There is a version in the 70s with, I think, Gregory Peck. And I've seen these and they never got me. I just wasn't interested. I just couldn't get into them. And I think the reason is because Les Mis is a huge book. It's 1,000 pages. And the musical in itself is like nearly 3 hours, if not 3 hours long. And because it's so long, there's so much to cram into it. So much. And the musical does a good job at sort of focusing on what it needs to, and having good songs to make it engaging. Whereas other versions, some of them feel like they try, even with a mini-series, they feel like they're trying to cram in everything. And it doesn't necessarily work for me. Whereas this version, it doesn't. Okay, it cuts out characters, and it does rearrange a lot of things, and it even sort of cuts out an end. It stops a lot earlier than the book and the musical. But it works because it doesn't try to cram too much stuff in. You get to have a little bit more time with some of the characters. Like Fantine and Jean Valjean, they barely have much interaction in the musical. Whereas in this one, we actually see them talk, we actually see them go on a date even. And it works because, you know, she's ill, yes, it's a very sort of somber day, but still, it still is. And Cosette and Marius get a bit more. We actually get the idea they've been seeing each other for like a few weeks rather than just, oh, look, we love each other. But yeah, it just expands on what needs to be expanded and cuts out everything that really isn't really needed. And that's why I fell in love with the film, and I still love it. I haven't watched it in a long time, but it's definitely one of my favourite films and one of my favourite musicals, which is why it's one of my favourite things. So another film that sort of grabbed me not long after the whole Les Mis thing was a film that I saw at the cinema, and I still say was the first film I ever saw with Johnny Depp in. Even though my brother insists that I watched Edward Scissorhands as a kid, I have no memory of watching Edward Scissorhands as a child. The first film I remember seeing Johnny Depp in was Sleepy Hollow. I saw this at the cinema, and I remember loving it so much that I dragged a friend to go and see it again a week later. And I don't even know what it was about it. I just loved the goth. I mean, I was very much into sort of dark horror movies and gore and that kind of thing in the time. I was very much into the gothic aesthetic when I was a teenager, so this very much appealed to me. I love the style, I love the set, I love Johnny Depp in it, I love his character, because I did have a thing for characters who were kind of cowardly but still managed to sort of survive in the end. So I loved him in it. I love the style. Again, I love the blood is so vibrant compared to the rest of everything else is quite dull. Characters are quite varied. They've got a lot of British actors in it, which is quite cool. So yeah, I don't know why, I just sort of absolutely fell in love with it. I remember when it was before it was released on VHS, I kept on going down to the video store. I wasn't sure when exactly it was going to be released, so I kept going down to the video store asking if it was in. Every weekend I would go down and check if it was in, and it wasn't in yet, it wasn't in yet, it was in yet, just so I could rent it. I was that eager. In the meantime, I had a book of the script, and a book of the, like a novelization to tide me over until it did come out. And I still like it, I still really enjoy it. Now, I sort of recognise it as a sort of Hammer horror. I was watching a video once where someone compared it to the old Hammer horror films. And even though I haven't seen any Hammer horror films, I have seen enough clips and bits and pieces to see that that's probably where they got the inspiration from, and it probably was Tim Burton's version of a Hammer horror film. Either way, despite Christina Ricci being kind of dull and boring in it, the rest of it is actually really good, and I still say it's one of my favourite films. Now, one thing I kind of want to do soon is either a Marvel month or a superhero month. Because I really do love the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I got completely obsessed with it. Every time a new movie comes out, have to see it as soon as possible. I've seen a few of them more than once at the cinema. And I really do love the whole Marvel Cinematic Universe. But what was the film that got me into the Marvel Cinematic Universe? The Avengers, of course! The one that brought them all together. Now, when I first saw this, I wasn't that fussed on the whole idea, because even though I thought it was a creative idea, I'd only actually seen, I think I'd seen all of them, but I'd not been all that, I hadn't been like, oh my god, wow, cool, this is the best thing ever. And even after I saw it, I enjoyed it, but I didn't really get into it. Until about a year later, when I came back to it, and watched it again, and thought, oh my god, suddenly, I don't know what changed. Maybe because I'd seen the films again since, and I think I'd seen a few other ones. Like, I think Iron Man 3 had come out, and Thor Dark World had come out since I watched it again. And suddenly it was like, oh my god, you know what? Yeah, love it now. And yeah, that's what sparked my interest. Like I said, I fell in love with the characters. And like I said, seeing them all come together, fighting together, the whole end battle is just a hell of a lot of fun. It's just so creative. I love, there's this one continuous shot where they all sort of, one fights and then they join another one and they fight, and it's just this shot that goes around to each one of them, and it's amazingly done. And of course, I did also have a bit of an obsession with Jeremy Renner at the same time, which kind of helped. So Hawkeye has become one of my favourite Avengers. Him probably next to Thor, I would say. There is actually more I want to say on the Avengers, which I will save for when I do that month. But yeah, that film kick-started my love of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And because of that, it will always be probably my favourite of all of them. So I'm going to end on a film series. And this film series I got particularly obsessed with a couple of years ago. And it was one of the few times I'd ever been obsessed with the whole film series. And what sort of started it was The Hobbit. Now, I don't care what people say if they say that, oh my god, you prefer The Hobbit over Lord of the Rings? You must die now. I don't care. I love The Hobbit. I do love it more than Lord of the Rings. That's not to say I don't like Lord of the Rings. I love Lord of the Rings. I'm not going to go into this. But yeah, when I first saw it, I wasn't that fussed on it. When I came back to watch it after watching the other ones, I actually found I enjoyed it a lot more. And suddenly I got completely obsessed with watching the first two, because at the time the third one was only in the cinemas. I saw that twice at the cinema. And it used to be that I preferred the first one, and then the second one, and then the third. I felt they went sort of a bit downhill as they went along. The first one is absolutely brilliant, and I absolutely love all of it. I don't care if it's got extended scenes that aren't necessary. I don't care that they've stretched it into 3 films. To be honest, I want it to be longer. You know, I want these dwarves to go on their journey and never get to the mountain and go on more and more mad things. That's what I wanted to see. That's what I loved. That's probably why I preferred the first 2 over the third one. That is until I saw the extended edition, and now I love the extended edition. It's like, how did you cut those Why did you cut those scenes out? That's what made the film amazing for me. But yeah, I've never obsessed over a film series so hard, and I came back to them quite recently and obsessed over them again. I just love them. I love the characters. I love the set. I love the look of it. I love the I watched all the behind the scenes stuff as well. The making of is interesting. And like I said, I do really like Lord of the Rings. And because of getting into these again, I'm not going to bother. I got into Lord of the Rings as well. So I love all of Middle-earth. But yeah, I can't help it. The Hobbit is one of my favourite films. One of my favourite film series. And I'm not ashamed to admit that. So, yeah, so that is some of my favourite movies. There are obviously a lot of other films that I do also really enjoy, and have watched multiple times, but these are the ones that hold, I guess, the most sentiment, and the ones that I keep coming back to, and I will probably continue to keep coming back to, one way or another. So yes, thank you for watching, and next week, maybe a movie review. In fact, I have got an idea for next week as well, so you'll have to wait till next week to find out what that is. Bye.